Awesome. We are live.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Do you want to present as well, or this is fine for you?
I have a few slides. Let me quickly share my screen and see what that looks like. Or do I just share my screen and go to that tab looks like?
Yeah.
Hang on one second. Let me blow this up. Oh, that's cool. It will actually let me pick a tab. All right. Just 1 second. Moving tabs around. Here we go. You can see my screen? Yes. You can see my screen, right, Shri?
Yeah, I can. Just a minute. Just a minute. We can see your screen. I'll add that also to this.
Oh, perfect. Here we go.
Yeah.
Perfect. Let me just rename this text so it doesn't say. There. Great. You like using this tool for streaming?
Yeah, StreamYard is pretty good. Yeah.
India-based?
I don't think so. I'll just check. Maybe India-based. In software, you can't just gently.
You can't tell.
You can't tell.
Yeah. Do you have to
Anyways.
stream this to your audience, or how does that work?
No, it is streaming, so it's going live. So, and
got it.
we are also live on Google as well.
Neat. That's cool. I had a few conversations this morning. I just talked to somebody at Pre-Magic, told them to show up, see if he shows up.
Awesome. I think we
A bunch of
can
people have
get
accepted.
started. There are 18 people. Maybe we can just wait for maybe a couple of minutes. It's
Great.
just getting started.
Well, good evening, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon.
Yeah, we have Ashish from Seattle, and I'm here in Bangalore in HSR layout, so which is a startup hub. So it's been a good this thing. And I think whenever you share, I think I'll just add it into the stream as well, so we can get this thing.
Got it. Yeah, we'll have a conversation. Clearly, Shri and I will have a conversation. There might be slides that we bring up based on the conversation in the middle. But we want this to be an interactive session, so please ask questions. Stop at us any minute. We're here to share more about Active ICP, product market fit, and geek out with you.
Awesome. I think if the number hits 30, I think we should get started.
All right, what are we at?
23, 24, 25. Right. So.
Growing. Phenomenal. Yeah. Where are people joining us from? Hey, it is baby. I see him. Hi, baby, Priyanka. Cool. Oh, this is your first LinkedIn Live? I didn't know this. That you've joined.
Yes, I generally do podcasts, but this is my first time I'm doing a LinkedIn Live. Priyanka and my team is the more of the LinkedIn Live expert.
Got it. Hey, that's great. I love it. It doesn't feel like the first time. It's a very slick setup on this side. I can tell you, joining it. It's very slick.
Yeah.
Maybe what we do, Shri. Go ahead.
I think we can get started.
Yes.
What to do?
And I think the great question is from Sanjay. He's saying, what's ICP? Maybe we start there, unless you have something. We'll do a quick round of intros, clearly, and then we can jump into that question.
Of course. I think I'll just start with a brief introduction. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Factors.ai LinkedIn Live. Today, we have a very, very, very special guest, Ashish. He joins us from Seattle. He's also founder, CEO at Relevo. But most importantly, he's also a very, very, very seasoned marketer in the B2B space. So as you all know, Factors.ai works with B2B marketing and sales teams. We fundamentally solve for account intelligence for B2B GTM teams to help them identify high intent ICP prospects and reach out to them either through marketing or sales motions. But the key thing here is, what is the ICP prospect you are going to reach, and what is the high intent ICP prospect? So that's exactly is what Ashish is here to solve for. His software, his product really goes deep into defining ICP, helping you identify who's the high intent ICP with the help of AI. But more than me talking about it, I would leave it to Ashish to give us a narration of his career from India, Aurangabad, to all the way up to Seattle, and also his journey across marketing into eventually into becoming a founder. So we'd really like to learn Ashish's journey and also deep dive into the ICP journey part also. Yeah.
Shri, thank you for the very kind words, kind introduction. Yeah, it's been a fun journey. I'm a chemical engineer by training, and I did polymer science at MIT in Pune, if people know what that is, and used that to get a scholarship and move to the US 25 years ago.
Wow.
I did a master's in material science. That's when I realized, hang on a minute, what I really enjoy is marketing. What I really enjoy is talking to people, and it all comes from having worked in sales for Tata Elxsi, which is an Indian company, back in 1997. And actually I visited Bangalore after 25 years. I was there in 97, 98 for Tata Elxsi, and sort of started pivoting from chemical engineering on. It was 2000. I started working for a bunch of startups, and I've done. I was at Capital One doing small business marketing in financial services. Then went to business school, and really the last 15 years, almost 20 years, have been spent in the technology world, where I was at Microsoft for the first 7 years, worked at Visio, which is a diagramming product, for 2 years, and then spent almost 5 years working on an incubation product called Red Dog that ended up becoming Azure. So we were, my co-founder and I were one of the first, I'm going to say 100 people who worked on that product, which was a phenomenal journey. And I've done 4 startups since. I was at Aptio, which was recently in the news because IBM bought them. But I stayed from, I want to say 25 million odd to them going public. And then I was the first VP of marketing at a company called Amperity, which is a CDP. My last stint was at a company called Skilljar, which is a customer education platform. And I helped them grow from roughly 2 to 12 million odd in revenue and secure a Series B. That's when I sort of took this leap. And a big reason I took this leap is I realized that when you're in a startup, product market fit is everything at the end of the day. And product market fit is really repeatable patterns that you can leverage to grow the company. These patterns are really hard to identify if you're at a startup. So you end up having to hack a bunch of few tools together to figure out who are my best customers, why do they like us, how do I find more of them so I can keep growing. And really that's the concept, to address Sanjay's question here too. And thank you, Nikhil, for sort of mapping that out, calling that out. But the ideal customer profile is, who are the customers that can get the most value from using your product? Who are the customers that have a problem that they're trying to solve? And who are the customers that if we reach them and they buy our product, can have the highest lifetime value for us? That segmentation and targeting problem is what we've set out to solve at Relevo. And again, to Shri's point, we're using machine learning and AI to look at all the signals that we can track to find these most valuable companies for you. Why does it matter? It matters because on the biggest challenge you have as a startup is you don't have time and you don't have resources. So you have to be extremely focused in where you spend your efforts. Go-to-market efforts, clearly, but also product efforts, customer success efforts, support efforts, all of them. And the ideal customer profile is the best envelope, it's the best framework that lets you align resources across sales and marketing and the rest of the company and build something that's valuable to the people who are willing to pay the most amount of money for it. So it's a sort of a long introduction, Shri, apologies, but that's sort of my story.
It's been an amazing introduction. One, you had been through at least 3 or 4 market boom bust cycles, right from 2000, yes, 2008, and then later the 2020 Corona, and then after that, now 2021, 2022 as well. Second, very solid experience around B2B marketing, right from the heydays of Microsoft into Azure, and then startups, Aptivo, and few other things. But fundamentally, how did this journey, of course, you would have seen it in each and every level. One is we can define an ideal customer profile. Can you help us understand where do people go wrong in defining an ideal customer profile?
Yes.
Defining it right is something the thing, but defining it wrong might actually give you something like, okay, did I do that wrong?
Totally right. Totally right. It's great. Let me quickly share a slide that tells you about what are the symptoms that you typically see, to your point, that help you understand that you are not defining your ICP right. Right. So this is, you may have a question, right? Shri said it. Well, do we have a correctly defined ICP? If you're seeing any of these symptoms, odds are, or many of these symptoms even, odds are you haven't done as good a job as you could in defining your ideal customer profile. The one that most companies run into first is we're outbounding and we're not seeing a high hit rate or a high response rate from our prospects. That's number one. But all the others follow, which is, hey, we sign a customer, but the deal's not that big, or the pipeline's not moving that fast, or even worse, we signed a customer, a bunch of customers, and then they started churning. Campaigns is another thing where this happens typically when you're a slightly bigger company, where you'll go to the sales team and you'll say, hey, how come you're not working these leads we gave you? And they'll say, oh, you're not spending any money on the customers we actually want to go after. So there's clearly a disconnect that happens between sales and marketing. All of these are symptoms. What mistakes do you make? Well, the first mistake is to go really broad. As startup founders, our natural inclination, you're told the bigger the TAM, the better. That's true. That's correct. You do need a big TAM, but you also have to be careful to not have a TAM that's so big that you could be all things for all people. And you cannot be all things to all people. Your goal, depending on your stage, is to find the right number of true fans, if you will, for your product. So if you're seed stage, it's finding the 100. I'm making these numbers up, but scale-wise, it's finding the right 100 fans for your brand, for your company, for your offering. If you're Series A, it's the right 1,000, right? So as the funding stages go on, you're looking for an expanding circle of true fans, which means you can't go after hundreds of millions of companies, but even hundreds of thousands of companies. You really have to hone in on the right set. So that's really condition number one. Condition number two, or mistake number two, is using only firmographic or only technographic information to define your TAM. They are necessary but not sufficient. So you'll ask people and you'll say, what's your ICP? And they'll say B2B SaaS. You go, oh, that's your TAM, but that's not your ICP, because B2B SaaS is massive. How big of a company is in B2B SaaS? Exactly right. How big of a company, sort of what criteria, what problems are they trying to solve? What use cases do you want to go after? And sort of what are their buying triggers? It's using a combination of these things that really helps you zoom in on your active ICP. Again, let me share a different chart here, which will help us understand this, which is what you really want to do is zoom in on companies that have an active need pain initiative that you can help with, number one. And that addresses this mistake of too broad. Two is you have to have a connection back to your pipeline and your deals. You have to see if the companies that you're going after are actually converting into meetings booked, pipeline generated, closed won deals. And if they're not, that's a bad sign. So that's a mistake that I see people making sometimes, which is you can't just define an ICP and stop. You have to define and track it on an ongoing basis. And the third point, you have to keep refreshing it because your product changes, competitive dynamics change, the market conditions change. So you always have to keep tweaking, iterating on this approach over a period of time. At least every quarter, you have to make this change. And the last point is super important, which is even if you have a well-defined ICP, what's the goal? The goal from a sales and marketing perspective is to build effective campaigns or get yield in terms of outbound productivity. You only get that when you segment your ICP into criteria that you can have specific messaging around. And this again goes back to the pains, use cases, needs, etc. So it's a combination of these mistakes that I see people make all the time. Just to recap, too big, not based on data, hasn't been refreshed in many weeks or quarters, and typically has not been broken down into segments. There's a fifth one, which is not having a shared definition across the company. That typically is a really bad problem, because if you don't have a shared definition of ICP, you have people running around all the way across the board trying to do different things.
Got it. So just to make it a little less abstract from definitions and other things, can you give examples at a company level, badly defined ICP? And second, how did they eventually get into a rightly defined ICP and started getting traction?
Yeah, great question. So, I gave you the B2B SaaS example. That's a very common occurrence. Unfortunately, I'm not even trying to be funny, which is you'll go in and you'll talk to a SaaS and you'll say, hey, SaaS company, what's your ICP? And they'll say B2B SaaS. You'll say, well, hang on, actually, let's define it a little more sharply. And the things we want to look at are these things, which is, let's look at the two things to start with. The first question you ask is, from a company size perspective, what's the sweet spot of the customers that you go after? And here's the thing that you should think through. If you say you want to go after an enterprise company, you need to have things like SOC to compliance, and the ability to address RFPs, long sales cycles. If you're not built for that, that is not your ICP. And really the first question I ask folks is, tell me about your customer base and tell me about your pipeline. Can we look at those two things and find patterns in those two things to then zoom in on something more specific? So you want to go from B2B SaaS to how big is the company that you're going after, and how big, not from a revenue perspective, because you don't get that information, LinkedIn employee count, right? So that's really step number one. Step number two is looking at your pipeline and your deals. Is there any sub-industry pattern that's emerging? Do you have security companies that make up most of your pipeline and close won deals? Or do you have fintech companies? Or do you have martech companies, right? So that's sort of the second layer. The third layer is geographical presence. Are they all in a part of the world? Are they all in a particular area, in a particular country? Are they all companies based in California? Are they all in sort of Silicon Alley? Are they up in Seattle, whatever that might be? And again, the goal of all of this is to find lookalikes. Right? Is to say, if we can define this ICP sharply, we can find more companies that fit that particular model. Technographic, it's to say, sort of, what are your integrations that you look for? What are your competitors? What are your complements? Can we define that more crisply and get to that? Quickly on the use cases and challenges side, what are the problems they're trying to solve today? That tells you that they're a good fit. For factors, it might be they're trying to grow their inbound channel, or they're trying to have a bridge between inbound and outbound, where they're outbounding companies, they don't know if they're getting responses. Factors gives you really valuable signals on who's showing up on the website and how they're engaging and how much they're engaging on your website. So you can look for, well, they're trying to grow inbound in particular, or they're trying to grow the bridge between inbound and outbound. Or you can look for signs of, if you're a security company, have they had a breach, is an example. Mm-hmm. Or is there a new regulation that's come out in a particular industry that makes security a bigger area of focus? From a use case perspective, it's really, what use cases are you selling to, right? And then from a buying trigger perspective, look for things like, well, have they had a new exec? Typically, people make platform decisions when there's a new person who heads that function. Have they had somebody new come in? Have they had a new product that they've launched? Have they had a merger or an acquisition? It's these specific questions, Shri, that help you then zoom in on a much more specific ICP. Does that address your question?
It does address to an extent. I think it also answered Nikhil's question here. If you're starting a SaaS business, should you first try onboarding a small client or target a big brand? But it's more like, what is your stage, what you are ready for at that point in time. You addressed it in the first part. In addition to the question, maybe it was an extension, actually it answered a lot more. Can you take an example of a company for example, like any known SaaS company, whether it's in the market or Series D or a unicorn level SaaS company, but how they progressed over the last 5 years in terms of their ICP and others.
Yes, great question. So, I can talk about Skilljar in particular, where I was, and I'll give you an example. Actually, we don't have to use a company that I worked at. Let's use an example, a generic example of a company, sort of how they grow from seed stage to later stage. There's typically, if you're in a well-defined category, you have competitors that you can go after. Most startups, though, typically are trying to create their own category. They're not coming in to be the 8th or 9th product in a particular category. They're coming in and trying to do something that's not been done before. And what that means is you have to find the early adopters in that market. You have to find people who are thought leaders like you super early and start building that movement of who you're going after, which means the signals you're looking for in that case are, who are these early adopters in that space? Who are people who use new technologies, who are trying to solve hard problems? At Aptio, it meant we were talking to companies only that had at least $1 billion in IT spend, right? So we were going after major companies, very different approach than what you would do at most startups. But Aptio was built from day one to be an enterprise company. So the DNA of the company from day one was clear. We were going after massive companies that had massive IT spend because they had the biggest problems that we could go solve for. But the company was built for it, right? To Nikhil's point, that meant they could deal with having 2-year sales cycles. That meant that they could deal with having quarters where you're closing a bunch of deals and quarters where you're not closing any deal at all, right? Lumpy sort of quarters was sort of a fact of life early on in the life of the company. And you have to decide, are you built for that? That also meant we could deal with RFPs. We could deal with procurement teams. We could deal with really
contracts,
long
legal teams,
compliance. Exactly right. So it was really this combination of what do we have as a company from a skills perspective and a capabilities perspective and a product perspective, who's the most willing to pay for it, and then changing that matching process as the journey of the company continues. Then, as you're building a product that's much more it's less of a service, more of a product. In Aptio's case, you can start sort of shrinking or increasing the aperture where it's not just $1 billion in IT spend. You can go after 500 million, 250 million, right? You can sort of keep going in their world down market. Most companies do the opposite. You'll start with companies that are, let's say, 100 to 200 employees from a problem solving perspective, tech stack perspective, and then you'll slowly start going up market in some way, because you're increasing the sophistication of your product and you want to find people that are willing to pay for that. The longer you've been at it, the more established hopefully the categories become, which means the more willing people are to pay for it as time goes on.
Got it. One more thing, which is of course a problem which a lot of companies or even startup founders or people who are looking to start up might find now, is like 2021, 2022, it was a market which was very different. And one, you can think of a lot of problems, a lot of good to have problems also had very good markets. People were willing to buy for this thing because time was on premium. And the last 6-7 months, you've seen the market change. Of course, there are some green shoots, but the market is currently changing. So when the market changes, how do you redefine your ICP? How do you handle that kind of a situation? And how do you validate your ICP journey in this case?
Great question. So I'll reiterate what I said earlier, and thank you for bringing this up. You have to revisit your ICP every quarter. You just have to. And you have to do it for the reason you mentioned. I think that 2021, 2022 is sort of the extreme example where if you think about the general mindset in the market, it was grow at all costs. It was, let's throw money at this growth problem and see how quickly we can blitzscale our way through this journey. Clearly, those days are gone. Nobody's spending money like crazy to grow at all costs or any cost today. And what that means for you as a product is, let's say you're a MarTech vendor or a sales tech vendor, you have to pivot from this story of we can help you grow to we can help you grow efficiently. That's a very clear distinction. That also means all the buying signals associated with that transition change. So you may have been looking at funding rounds as an example, as a signal. hey, every company that raises funding or raises a particular round of funding is a good target for us. Well, not as many funding rounds are happening anymore, right? So that stops being as important of a signal, number one. Number two, you might have been looking at ad spend as a proxy for how good is the company. Well, ad spend has gone down or plateaued quite a bit in the last year or 2 years as well. So really what you're doing is this match of what's changed in the market. What does that mean from a challenges, use cases, and buying triggers perspective for our company? And does that potentially mean that the firmographic mix changes for us also? Does that mean, for example, that the people who would find our product most valuable are now either smaller or bigger than we thought they would be or they were in the past? Number one. Number two, for these specific challenges that they're facing, what are good proxies that we can look at from a buying trigger perspective that we can go after? And I like that comment, which is you do have to care about buying triggers. But remember, it's really a combination of these factors. What you don't want to do is look at a buying trigger at a company that doesn't fit your firmographic and technographic details. And this is part of a challenge with intent, as an example, right? Intent broadly is it tells you behavioral information, but it doesn't tell you any of this why information. So what you really want is a marriage of these two channels to revisit your ICP. And one last point I'll make is when you have these shifts in ICP, you have to remember that what's changing is your segmentation strategy, your targeting strategy, and your positioning strategy, which means your messaging has to change too. What you cannot do is change your ICP, which is segmentation and targeting, but not change your positioning and messaging. You're setting yourself up for failure. In this new era of efficient growth, you have to talk about that, but talk about that to the companies that matter. So that's the matching that you have to do.
Got it. I mean, that's on the positioning side. What about the product side? How does that change?
That's a fantastic question. So this is where an ICP is of extreme strategic importance all up. And if you're a marketer, it's the best way for you to get a seat at the table from these strategic conversation points of view. For example, if you're sitting in a board meeting, the question comes up, what's our ICP? What you're really talking about is the people that we're going after. Do we have the right sales channels, marketing channels, sales approaches, messaging to go after them? Do we have the right product that meets these challenges and use cases that we're going after? And then do we have the right customer success, customer support function to onboard them, get them to success, get them to renew, and get them to grow with us? If market conditions have changed and you've gone from grow at all costs, as an example, to efficient growth, clearly that means the challenges that people have changed. So the question you have to ask yourself is, does the product we have today, is it still best positioned to address those challenges from an ICP perspective? And really, you have to look at it by segment, which is, we typically have 2 or 3 segments that we go after. Does this change affect all segments that we're going after? Does it affect just one segment? And how important is that segment for us in the future? And what changes do we have to make across the company, including the product, to address these changes, address these use cases? Because often it's not just all doom and gloom. Often a lot of new use cases pop up when market conditions change. Think about COVID, scary time, but remote work became a huge opportunity. And it was great news for companies like Zoom and Hopin and what have you, that they could tap into that opportunity for that period of time. So you always have to look at it not just from a threat perspective, but an opportunity perspective. What ICP lets you do is take a structured view at those challenges across the company.
Got it. And one thing is, of course, all these data points and structure and this thing. How do you source this data? How do you get this data? How do you start with this kind of a process for yourself?
Yeah. If you're doing this in-house, the best way to do it is to look at your existing customers and see qualitatively, can you find, let's say you're a seed stage startup or you're bootstrapping and you have 10 customers, 5 customers, whatever. It's to look for common patterns across those 5 customers. What we can do, what Releva can do for you is, let's say you're a Series A company, Series B company, or even a late stage seed company. We can look at your pipeline and your existing customer base and build really a custom data set of all of these conditions for you, where we're looking at What are they saying on their website? What are they saying on LinkedIn? What are they saying in their SEC filings? Whatever the custom data sources might be, to give you this data set that says, look, for your pipeline and your existing customer base, these signals are the ones that seem to be the most salient. These are the signals that have the highest correlation with opportunity and closed won deals. Let's now find other companies that fit that exact same pattern. If you're doing it in-house, look at what works first and then expand from there. Talk to your customers, right? Talk to your customers to get a sense, if you're early on, about what are the challenges specifically that they're facing. How are they using your product? What made them buy your product? What made this a sort of a slam dunk decision on their side when they made that purchase? As you grow bigger, that's where machine learning and AI can help you, because we can build these custom data sets and look for patterns that humans have a hard time finding. I'll give you an example. We have a security company, and we found that for them, any company that invests in ESG initiatives, so environmental, social sort of initiatives, was a good client. And they were like, we would never have thought that, but it became clear the more they started digging in. Companies with ESG initiatives share data with a lot of other third-party stakeholders, and they have to be extremely careful in how they share that data. So that makes a ton of sense. But this is something that would have been really hard for a human being to pick up. And that's where machine learning and AI can be a fantastic friend for you to come find these signals in the data set.
Got it. That's great. And
Shri,
I think,
sorry, there's a question about segment and category. So let's weave that also and address it.
Yeah, I think we should address that. We can go ahead and address that. Yeah.
Got it. So, category, think about it this way. A category is how people define a bucket of products. For example, CRM is companies like Sugar CRM and Salesforce and HubSpot to some degree. Marketing automation is clearly Marketo and others that fall in that. You have to ask yourself as a founder, do you fit an existing category, or are you creating a new category, or are you creating a new subcategory? It's possible that you want to be a CRM, but only for healthcare companies that do medical devices. I'm making this up. So that becomes the subcategory. That's where there might be an intersection with segment. It's possible, not possible. It's 100% likely that in every category there are segments. So let's say you are a CRM provider. Let's say you're HubSpot. You probably have a SMB segment you go after. You probably have a mid-market segment you go after. You probably have a Salesforce Compete segment that you go after. You probably have, that's sort of your segmentation is taking your addressable market and cutting it in slices. Category is sort of how people think about your solution from their vantage point. And remember, it's not what you say, it's really what your prospects are thinking in terms of how they define their solution. Shri, please chime in here, because you might have a different take on this, or might have more to add on here.
No, I do agree. But the only thing is, segment also has both, not just from a kind of a size perspective, there is geography, there is also a few other buying triggers and product maturity stage and other parts also baked in. And that also segment will actually come into your ICP definition. Category is like a broad scope of all B2B SaaS companies. And then you come to a very specific set of B2B SaaS companies. And then from there, you come later into the intent ICP, the thing. Who are the ones within the ICP which want to buy your product now, which are the ones which your sales team has to go after. So coming into that question as well.
Yeah.
So we defined broad category, we defined an ICP. We also looked at active ICP. But how does it affect the sales motion here? I mean, so you give an active ICP, you give this thing kind of like, this is a specific set of companies you want to work with. How does it affect the sales motion in terms of quantitative results? How does it impact sales velocity? Does it impact ACVs? Does it impact some kind of like better kind of like lifetime value, if you can take into that parts? That
100%. So what business metrics have we seen our customers move the needle on? They fall in all of these buckets. The first one, the one where you start seeing immediate impact, is an outbound conversion rate. I'll tell you the extreme sort of example of this. We had a client who was outbounding about 1,000 accounts a month and getting one meeting. Right? Conversion rate, terrible. Terrible conversion rate. Beyond the conversion rate, and this is before they started working with us, this is the before story. Beyond the conversion rate, though, what you're really doing is you're burning up a bunch of your market. You can't keep going back to the same people over and over again, right? You either are going to trigger their spam filters or they're going to ignore you. So it's extremely important that when you reach out to someone, you reach out with the best possible message, the most relevant message for them. With our approach, we said, listen, start with just 50 accounts, but let's find the 50 best accounts for you. And let's take a much more fine-grained approach in how you reach out to them. They booked 6 meetings from those 50 accounts in the first 3 weeks that they were going after them. And all of them became opportunities. So and it's not magic in some ways. What you're really doing is you're finding people who have the problem you solve, who are actively trying to solve the problem you have, and you're speaking to them like you understand that that's the problem they have. What is most outbound? It's one size fits all. It's spray and pray. And it talks about the product. It almost never talks about the challenges that people are facing. When you flip that on its head, the first thing that changes is the outbound conversion rate. The second thing that changes is the speed with which the deal moves through your funnel. Again, if you found people at the right time, and especially if you found people in the either solution identification or vendor selection stages, broadly, right, there are 3 stages of B2B sales. One is problem definition. This is where somebody's trying to figure out, do I have a problem? What is it? Sort of, how do I define the problem? Second stage is, oh, I have a problem. Definitely. How do I solve it? What are the basic options available? And the third is, I don't have a problem. I know solutions exist. I'm evaluating the vendors within that category. We can help you find people in the second and the third. We can actually help you find people in all 3 buckets, and there are different things you should do. Let's talk about that next. But when you find people in the solution identification or vendor selection stages, deals move really quickly. These are also deals that tend to be bigger because why? Because you're starting with the firmographic and technographic elements that map to the highest willingness to pay. And you're not going after companies. It's not just about size. You're not going after companies that don't have the pain, because a lot of times willingness to pay is related to the benefit, the value that they can get from you. This also ties back to return on marketing investment. If you're doing LinkedIn sponsored updates, loved your post on this, Shri, yesterday, you should focus on companies that could benefit from your solution as opposed to taking a broad approach. Then you can have really good ROMI numbers to talk about in your next QBR, MBR, board meeting, etc., where you can say, hey, look, we started with these 500 companies. Here are 20, 30, 40 that entered the funnel, and here's sort of where we stand with them on that conversion perspective.
Repeatable sales motion at a fundamental.
100%. 100%.
So one thing which a lot of people also mention, and they say, yes, intent is great, and we have to get people intent. Most of the times when we actually reach the company, they have almost decided. It's like something like we are chasing something which is almost gone away. It's a missing bus. How do you avoid that?
Oh, what a great question. So I have major issues. Intent can be a very powerful tool when used properly, but there are some challenges with intent. You just called out one of the most important ones, biggest ones. You're getting that data at the same time that everybody else is getting that data, which means there's going to be a feeding frenzy at that point, right? Everybody is going to attack that account with everything they have. And that's a dangerous place to be as a startup. So that's number one. Number two is you never really know who it was at that account that was looking or showing intent. It could be somebody looking for a job. It could be somebody doing research, or it could be somebody looking to buy tomorrow. You never really know what's going on. So that's number two. Number three is it's really, really late. Let's go back to this, to the model of problem identification, sort of problem definition, solution identification, vendor selection. Intent comes really late in the vendor selection process. When they're horse racing you or comparing you against somebody else, right? You have limited ability to influence a purchase decision at that point. What you really need to do is go earlier in that process. And at Actio, we started all the way at the problem definition stage. And guess what? We never had any competition. If you help people define a problem a particular way, that's actually how you create categories. You're helping them see a problem that exists and define it in a way that has not been defined before. It was cost transparency for Actio. But that's the place to start. Now, look, that might be too early for many startups because you have to have resources to do that. Solution identification is definitely the best place to start, where you're looking for signs that they know they have a problem and they're looking to solve it, but they haven't yet started looking. That's the window that you want to get at. And there are signs you can pick up that that's happening. And that's where, again, when you start outbounding people and you start things showing up on your, see them showing up on your website, that's way stronger intent than somebody just having a blanket intent signal that pops up. And that's really the power of a combination of tools like Relevant and Factors.ai. That's what we can bring to the table is you generate your own intent. It's data that only you have, and it converts much better because of those reasons.
Awesome. Actually, one way I'm thinking about is like how to use website intent and use the data back into a kind of a LinkedIn ad sequence instead of an email kind of a sequence to actually cultivate that intent or kind of define the problem and also educate them on the problem so that to get into a more hardcore kind of like bringing them into your funnel rather than kind of like just leaving it with spam emails and other things. That's a pretty interesting thought. Thanks for that.
It's a really good point.
We are almost at the end of the system. It's like 41, 42 minutes. So we have spent almost 40 minutes, but I want to ask like if there is any specific questions from others, it's like which they want to get answered so which we can go through it as well. One more thing, which also is very clear is like how do companies at pretty large scale change this thing? So I have seen companies moving from India and they move to US market. So India already there like a couple of $1 million. Now they're trying to sell to the US market, more enterprise deals. And they really struggle in terms of like, okay, my product sells for this segment and this price for this kind of utility value and this thing, but how do I manage to do it in US?
Great question. It's a whole different market, number one. So you have to sort of come in with an open mind. Actually, what you cannot expect is that everything that's worked in India is going to work in the US. You don't have to throw out every pattern, but we have this really important concept of if you're succeeding in India, you can take a pattern and rinse and repeat it. You can get more customers based on that. Think about that as doubling down on a valuable segment. When you enter a new market, it might be US, it might be EMEA, it might be APAC, whatever, you have to be exploratory in your approach. You have to say, we think it could be one of these 2 or 3 segments that could be most valuable to us. And then what becomes extremely important is testing those segments quickly to see where you see the best hit rate and not allocating too many resources. If you just take something that's working in India, move it to the US and dump a bunch of money in LinkedIn sales ads or even outbounding or whatever it might be, you're not going to get the results. What you want to do instead is segment the market freshly based on what's happening in that market, based on the challenges that they're facing, based on the use cases that are relevant there. I'll give you one simple example. In general, resourcing for a function is much lighter in the US than it is in India. Right? So you look at HR. There are fewer people doing a particular function in India for a size of a company than there are in India. That means each person has to be uniquely productive in a way that may or may not be true in India. And I'm making really broad generalizations here, right? And I'm not the domain expert, but I'm just making a point that don't assume that the challenges that your buyers and users are facing in India are the exact same challenges that your buyers and users in the US could be facing. Start there, create segments you can test, get good results, and then you can double down on those segments. But go in with an open mind and go in with the mind of, we're going to test some things, see what works, and then double down on it.
Got it. That's it. And last question, I know there are a couple of others who might have questions also, but how do you look at churn rate? I mean, churn happens for even reasons beyond ICP. It can be pricing, it can be market changes and other things. So how do you handle the churn rate and how you actually move into the next thing?
Yeah. So churn, you're right. Churn happens for any number of reasons. Some of these reasons could be reasons that have nothing to do with you. So the first thing to do is if the company's going out of business, if they've changed their business model, if they've changed their focus area, whatever it might be, start there. Just make sure you're not going after other companies that fit that same model. What are you trying to do? The thing you're trying to do is avoid making mistakes that led to that particular account getting churned. And again, you're looking for patterns, right? So one-offs really don't make for a pattern. Typically, what you're looking for is a combination of these factors that we were just looking at. Let me go back to this slide. You're not looking for any one thing. It's, are you seeing a combination of maybe where the deal size is small and you're seeing a bunch of churn? Or the deal size is small, the velocity is slow, and there's a bunch of churn. If all of those things are happening, then you need to revisit your segmentation strategy and your ICP to say, we thought the SMB market was a good market for us, but it's failing on all three of these dimensions. So let's go revisit what the right ICP could look like.
Got it. I think that's all from me, from my side, and it's been very, very, very informative. I also got some good, interesting ideas also, and a couple of other people, which I think we should also talk together too, in terms of like ICP definition and going to the market and how the current system actually has a lot of people going wrong, and it's very hard. Or, for example, when the money was there, market is also indulging where you can make some mistakes. When the money is not there, you can't make mistakes, and not defining the ICP is a very, very, very costly mistake which founders can't afford. And thanks a lot for taking time on this, Ashish. One last question. I think in general intent, social and signal are personal way, especially different. I have an existing customer and the prospect. The new prospect will not leave a lot.
What a good question. Yeah. So I don't know your specific situation, and Shrikar, I'm happy to talk to you after the fact. And before I do though, just one plug. We're starting I think we've just started a founder group on WhatsApp based on the SaaS Insider event. If you're interested in joining that WhatsApp group, you can ping either of us on LinkedIn and we'll find a way to get you in it. So this is basically all the co-founders that are based in India that are trying to break into the US market. And it should make for a good set of conversations. And hopefully some get-togethers as well. Shrikar, to your point, what you really are looking for is what are the unique conditions that make that particular persona have a problem? It's very common, by the way, that people will not leave social proof. Security companies, for example, a lot of security professionals, if you look at their LinkedIn profiles, there's nothing there. There's literally title. There's not even a picture of that person. And it's on purpose. They don't want to share anything about what they're doing. But if you look at what's happening at the company level, the industry level, the sub-vertical level, you can pick up signs that a specific person is trying to solve a specific problem. So only some of it depends on them saying something. If they're saying something phenomenal, you can pick that up and sell to it. But that's sort of the last problem. Kushagra's question is really interesting, but I think we'll have to go redo the whole session. So Kushagra, I may have to follow up with you because this is something we covered super early on. The short answer is local. Start local before you go global. Start small before you go big.
I mean, one hard lessons founders and especially me, we have learned over the period of time is like always go very, very, very narrow. Get the first 100 customers, then the world opens up much more easily than looking at very broad and then expanding into maybe 10 or 15 customers, finding churn, and then coming back into the normal. So that's
fantastic.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Ashish. Thanks a lot, everyone, for taking time to take your time, ask your questions, and also hopefully this would be a first of many LinkedIn Lives where we start going deeper into B2B marketing, ICP definition, and also sharing use cases and also problems which founders or companies or marketers which we face so that people don't make the same mistakes. Learning from others is always better than learning by mistakes. So that's
no doubt. No doubt. Cool. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the great questions. If you have other questions, find us on LinkedIn and we'll do our best to address them there.
Sure. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye.
Thank you so much.